Apples are so versatile. They can be mousse, they can be cakes, but I prefer them as MacBooks, iPads and iPhones. Freshly baked at 220 degrees, they make the perfect dish for every designer's day. Apple's products and their design approach are just delicious to look at. And this is mainly because of their minimal and clean design aesthetics. But there's another design style that is quite similar to the minimalism philosophy, but yet so different in its visual approach. And that's brutalism. And there was one thing that instantly stroked my mind and what I definitely want to change with the packaging. Brutalism in architecture is characterized by a stark, rugged and unapologetic aesthetic. And brutalist structures often tend to show their building materials, especially concrete, showing off the textures and the wooden imprints of the forms which are used to mold the poured concrete. And I want to take a similar approach and show off the building materials of the packaging itself, and therefore I'm replacing the nice and clean Apple packaging with this raw, unfinished cardboard box. To make a start, I'm going to place typography in, which is going to be iPhone, of course. And I found a font which underlines the technical aspect, but also has this brutalist feeling to it. The only thing that I need to change is the I, because the typography is capitals only, and I want to include the lowercase I for iPhone. And this is quickly done just by some masking. The use of big and bold typography and repeating patterns is often used by graphic designers to interpret brutalism. And I'm going to do the same here and just repeat the typography. In the original packaging, and I think this is going back to the original iPhone 3G, there's always an image of the product itself on the front, which totally makes sense because you want to see at one glance what you're actually buying, and I want to keep it like that. But since we want to take a little bit of a different visual approach here, I'm going to take a picture which is more like a snapshot rather than this clean design approach we have on the original packaging. But the image looks too polished though, and I definitely need to change that. To make it more raw, I have this Xerox copy machine effect in mind, which gives every image a nice grain and texture. And it is actually quite easy to pull off in Photoshop. You just have to jump into the filter gallery and apply the grain effect. I often use two types of grains, one soft one and one enlarged one. And lastly, to finish everything off, I'm applying a stamp filter on top of it. And then just play around with the settings overall to get the preferred look I want. Additionally to Apple iPhone, I'm going to include the model number as well. And yes, I'm well aware that the photo is not showing an iPhone 15, but guess what? We're naming it iPhone 15 anyway. To interpret brutalism, graphic designers tend to use unconventional and clashing color schemes. But I want to lean more towards the clean and desaturated architectural approach. To only implement color where it is actually functional. So I want to have one thing that sticks out, and that's the model number. And therefore I'm going to make it more prominent and I'm going to make it red. Every product or brand is advertised with a perfect slogan, which helps to represent, differentiate and promote a brand or a product by basically stripping it down to its essence and evoking emotions. So I'm adding a slogan as well, putting it into a box, and the genius philosophical sentence that I came up with is disrupt the present. Yes, I know. Heavy stuff. You guys need to let that sink in for a bit. I'm really not a good copywriter. To create a bridge from the iPhone at the top and this masterpiece of copywriting, I'm going to implement arrows which lead from top to bottom, but I want to use a more unconventional shape. And I think I'm letting myself inspire by the round edges of the iPhone. I'm just adding a block and I'm going to warp it so that it gives me a nice round arrow. Now I'm just repeating it by holding down the Alt button and just dragging it down. I'm going to select everything and align it perfectly with the Distribute Evenly tool. Brutalism in architecture has often an monolithic and blockish appearance. But since we're not building a house here, and we're trying to do graphic design, I need to convert that otherwise to design. And I'm trying to give my layout a most blockish appearance as possible. And one thing that fits in nicely, which comes from the backside of the packaging, is the barcode, which is a block by itself filled with little blocks. And I think this whole block is fitting in quite nicely to our blockish appearance. Man, I said block a lot here. But you get the point. The only thing that needs filling now besides me is the little space on the right hand side. Here I'm going to help myself to the back of the packaging as well. And I'm stealing the recycling element, which makes a really nice addition because it is again an arrow element like we have on the left-hand side. But it is yet so different and it really sticks out a little bit more, which I quite like. Now we only need to design the side of the packaging, and Apple usually puts either typography there or just the logo itself. And speaking of the well-rounded and proportioned Apple, the whole logo itself speaks minimalism, which I absolutely like. And the only thing that could be reduced to make it even more minimalist would be to get rid of the leaf or just to use a black circle. But there's one thing I have in mind which could give the logo a little bit more of a rough appearance without going too far away from the original minimalist approach. What does a fairy tale princess leave behind once she's bitten into a perfectly rounded apple? A bite mark. So we're going to make one. I'm just placing little circles over the logo and subtract them from the logo itself. Just repeat it until everything is done. And I want to differentiate the logo a little bit more, therefore I'm just using strokes instead of fill. And since repeating patterns are kind of a thing in my layout, I'm going to be true here as well and repeat the apple to fill up the space. To break the optical appearance a bit and contradict my own rule of only using color when it is functional, I'm going to color one apple red. And we're done. An apple redesign in a Brutalist style. If you want to see a redesign of hilariously dumb Amazon products that actually nobody should buy, you can click my video here. That was real fun, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and I see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.